Hey guys, we're here at the Online Acting Studio, and we're here to talk about voiceover.
Yay.
My name is
Okay.
Jeff Howell, and this is my dear friend Jessica Blue. Say hi.
Hi, I'm Jessica Blue.
And we'll try to answer a lot of questions today and have a nice conversation, right, Jess?
Yes.
So, anyway, a background about me: I started many years ago as a voiceover agent and enjoyed doing that, but then I decided to change over and go into casting. And I did that, and I worked at a very popular, very big radio production company. And we focused primarily on comedy. And I did a lot of TV and radio and started getting into audiobooks and that sort of thing. And then I moved to a different company and started specializing in promo and trailer. And then decided a number of years ago to go out on my own. And so I've been focusing more of my business model on dubbing, but yet I still have my hands in various other aspects of the VO industry. And I've been teaching for a long, long time. And that's how I met this wonderful person.
And you also do demos.
Oh, that's true. I do
Don't forget
demos
that.
and
You
coach
also
and all
do
that stuff
demos,
too. That's
yes.
right. Thank you.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, actually, I grew up on Bugs Bunny. I love watching cartoons, and I thought, wouldn't that be cool to be a cartoon? I thought it would be the most fun thing in the world. And I didn't realize until much later that cartoons was voiceover. And so way much later in life, I learned all about voiceover and started taking classes. And that's, yes, how I met you. You were one of my amazing teachers that I learned a lot from. And then I got an agent and then started doing more focusing on commercials and narration, even though I originally wanted to do animation. And then started to get back into video games. And then you got the call to do a dubbing project, and you said, I need help. I'm
I
not
did,
very
actually.
organized. I need help organizing things. And I'm like, yes, I will help you. And so we kind of jumped headfirst into the dubbing pool and taught ourselves dubbing. And then I slowly started to co-direct with you, and now I'm directing dubbing, which is awesome, and I love it. And casting as well. And yeah, it's so much fun.
And she's very good at it, by the way,
Thank you.
because I'm a good teacher.
You are. I learned everything I know from you.
Well, all kidding aside, the dubbing world, isn't it crazy?
It's blown up so much. I
Yeah.
mean, if you think about back in the day, the OG dubbing where it was so out of sync and just super irritating to watch. And nowadays, I mean, we're so hyper focused on getting the sync just right. And it's a lot of work, but I find it very enjoyable. It's so much fun for me from my perspective.
Well, and that's the key. You want to enjoy it too, but it is so technical. And I think that what people don't realize, I know you probably get frustrated when people say, I don't like to watch dubs. I want to read the subtitles because I don't like seeing the out of sync sort of performance. But what people don't realize is the amount of time and effort that we and the team that is surrounding us on each project that we put into it, and that it's not going to be perfect. But if you can sort of let that sort of roll off of you when you start watching something and you see the out of sync aspect of it, but if you can embrace the story, let the story carry you, draw you in, and hopefully, if all things are good in terms of the story's right, the casting is great, the directing is right, then you can allow yourself to see this wonderful piece of work and not have to read the subtitles.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sure you've heard the complaint too that people will sometimes activate the subtitles and they'll listen to the dub at the same time, and they're like, "Wait a minute,
It
why
doesn't
is that
match.
different? It doesn't match."
Right.
And
Or that's not what they're saying.
called adaptation, which you
Yes.
hate, but you're amazing at it. I mean,
I've
seriously,
gotten better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm amazing at it, but
No, Jess.
it was definitely a learning curve.
You're being too nice. You're being too modest. It is a gift to be a good adapter, and you are incredible.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You've adapted projects for me. And,
I have.
and many. And you've
But
done
it was
a
a
great job.
lot. It was a very big learning curve because I taught myself, as you know. I didn't have any instruction whatsoever. I was kind of winging it, Googling, researching, how does this work? How did this work? And finally, I was able to get some feedback from a producer. And it was just like, oh, and then the light bulb went off. And that's when it was like, okay, that makes more sense to do it that way and plug along. But at the same time, I mean, getting that feedback was invaluable. But then at the same time thinking, what am I doing? I suck at this because like I've been doing it this way, and what am I doing here? But adaptation is absolutely one of the most key ingredients to a good dub, because if you have a terrible adaptation, oh my gosh, it's going to make the sessions that much harder and longer because you're then having to rewrite stuff on the fly, make it work with the sync and voices and everything. And it's just, it can take forever. But
Well, this is a great opportunity to start talking about the modern landscape of what voiceover is looking like and where it might be going. Because, again, what we've been talking about with dubbing is just, it's amazing how that has exploded and fed the voiceover business.
yeah, I mean, Squid Games
Mhm.
really blew it up.
Absolutely.
Money Heist, Lupin, all of those shows
Yeah.
just really put dubbing on the map, I think.
I don't know about you, but whenever we have actors in and we're talking about, I like to kind of check the barometer of how the business is going in other areas. For example, commercially, I'll say, how are things commercially out there? Is it really busy? Because maybe I haven't done a commercial in a while, and so I want to find out what's going on in the business. And I don't know about you, but I think that the comment I get all the time is that it seems like there's a lot more non-union than union,
Mm.
and that people are having to work a lot harder because they're having to do their own self-recording at home, which brings a whole other set of skills from an acting standpoint in terms of how to record yourself. But you also have to be your own director. You also have to technically be able to handle the equipment and send out the files. So it's a situation where I like to find out what are the pitfalls, what's going on out there. And so have you heard any actors in your travels talk about maybe problems they're having out there? When you're just talking, let's say after you finish a take in your dubbing session and you guys are, you'll sit around and have some coffee and talk and they start complaining about the business. What do you think is their perception of what's going on out there in the VO world and what problems they're having?
Mostly, I mean, I don't have too many of those types of conversations these days, but I know back when the pandemic hit, it was a huge shift for actors because they were so used to going into a studio to record to now having to record at home. And a lot of them didn't necessarily have a home recording setup. So they had to learn about microphones, learn about audio recording software, soundproofing their closets and all that good stuff. And so it was definitely a shift from turning yourself from an actor into an engineer and a producer and a director because you're having to do it all yourself.
And that hasn't changed, by the way.
It hasn't,
In
because
fact, it's progressed even more.
it has, because there's still a lot of studios that will allow for remote recording, which is great for out-of-town actors, or if you're traveling, that's awesome, as long as your setup's really good.
Yeah.
And there's tons of places online you can look for researching good microphones and soundproofing and all of that stuff. But it was definitely a challenge to direct people from their house if they didn't have a good I remember I was directing one girl, I swear to God, she literally had a quilt over her head, was holding the microphone, and I said, you got to find a stand or something. You can't be, because it makes noise. You can't do that. But she still was holding a quilt, sitting next to a couch or a bed or something. I'm like, but you do what you got to do. They made it work. We made it work. But yeah, just figuring all of that stuff out, I think, was a big learning curve and learning experience for a lot of actors to shift into that. And some didn't want to do it. Some just like, forget it. I would rather go into a studio. And me personally, I much prefer going into a studio. I could not wait for studios to open back up because I had to contend with neighbors and noise and children because everybody was at home now. Whereas I used to have this window from like 9 to 3 p.m. during the day where I could record all of my auditions. And now everybody's home, running the TV, playing music, laundry, this, that. I was then having to record stuff at midnight. To get it out.
In addition to that, because what you're talking about is technical and it's all that, have found with actors too that they hate the fact that they're isolated.
Yes.
Because they like that interaction. They like the direction. And in terms of my coaching voiceover, a lot of times I will now ask actors, how did you feel about that take? How did you feel about that take? Because ultimately, I'm trying to not only train them in terms of the skill of how to create a performance, but also how to hear a performance, how to listen to themselves. And that's very hard to critically listen to yourself. And that is definitely a skill set that I'm trying to help actors get, because the business is what it is, and it is expanding every day.
Yep.
And the good news is it doesn't matter where you live anymore for the most part, but you're on your own. You're isolated, and that's terrifying. For example, I don't know if I told you, but last night or yesterday, I received, all of a sudden during the day, I started getting emails from actors that I've worked with, that I'm currently coaching and all that. And they had just received a big audition from a network, and it was so vague, and there were about 5 different spots, different promos on this network, and they were terrified, and they wanted me to coach them. I ended up coaching a number of people during the day, and then last night at 9:00 last night, I was about ready to crawl into bed, do a little reading, get enough sleep so I look great for today, and all of a sudden, an actor whom I love said, "Are you still up? Can you help? I just got home from a set and I need to be coached." And I couldn't say no. And I said, "Let me put on my clothes and I will coach you." And at first I had the phone right there in my bed and I was like, ugh, my chin, I can't do it. I got to get up and at least go to my table. So I did that. I spent 45 minutes coaching this actor on a very difficult audition. And that's my whole point of all this, is the fact that actors are having to be their own directors and make creative choices. So that's why, when I'm training people, that's a very important component of voiceover, is getting good training.
Yes.
And to be able to
100%.
arm yourself with all of that information. I mean, just like, you and I met, you knew you wanted to be in voiceover. And so therefore you wanted to seek out training. So you went to a school and studied with different professors. I, of course, was your favorite one. And you were one of my favorite students. Be very careful about that. And
I know that.
But you armed yourself with a lot of information so that you could take that, apply that,
Right.
and create a career for yourself, which you've done, and you've done a great job at it. But that's why that's important. But voice acting doesn't just fall from the trees. And as you know, we always joke about, I'm sure you've heard it too, when they find out that you're in the voiceover business on the other side, they say, "Well, I've always wanted to do voiceover." Well, great. Are you an actor?
Right.
And 50% of the time, it's, "No, I've never really acted before."
Right.
And so I always say, go take an acting class.
I mean, it's called voice acting.
Yeah.
Acting is the emphasis on the acting, because you have to know how to act. It's not, yes, your voice is important, but it's how you use your voice. Because when you're on camera, everybody sees what's happening. They see all the body movements. They see the smile. But with voiceover, they have to hear the smile and hear the eyebrow raise and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a lot different. But training is definitely number one.
So I'm curious. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. What, in all of your experience as a voice actress, not the director side, that's a separate side, but as an actress, what has been your favorite job or role? It doesn't necessarily have to be role specific, but in terms of the type of voiceover that you've done, what would it be?
Can I swear on this thing? Awesome. You just made my day. So one of my favorite roles was for, you remember those Coinstar vending
absolutely.
machines?
Oh yeah, I love those things.
Well, I guess that company decided, I don't know if it was that company, but another company decided to create these vending machines that were sort of like photo booths, and you could go in and take a photo, but they had different backdrops. So you could be on a runway, a fashion runway, you could be in space, you could be on stage as a rock star, all this weird stuff. And I was the voice of the computer, like for payments and push this button and all that. So very, very corporate sounding, very pleasant, whatever, like, "Please enter your credit card now," that kind of thing. And so, but I mean, all of that was just fine, matter of fact, straightforward, easy peasy, easy guys to work with, fun session. And it was remote. They were remote. They were in, I don't even know where, but so I just heard them in my ears. And at the end of it, they're like, "Okay, we think we got everything, but we have one little edit we want to do." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure, yeah, go give it to me. What is it?" It's like, "So when you say, I'm sorry, your credit card has been declined, we want you to add asshole at the end of that." I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?"
Really? That's the first
Did
time.
I just hear you say asshole?
It's interesting that they ask you. Usually
like,
they have to edit that out.
I know. She's like, "Yeah, we kind of want to make a prank on the engineer when he edits this all together." I'm like,
nice,
"I am
nice.
so there. Let's do it." So I said, "I'm sorry, your credit card has been declined, asshole." And just like so matter of fact, everything. And I just hear them cackling in my ears, just laughing. And they're like, "Do you have any other?" And I'm like, "Sure, dumb shit, idiot, dipshit." Like I just was rambling on.
I'm sure that was a stretch for you, I'm sure.
No. Real stretch. Woo-hoo, yeah. Oh my God, that was so much fun. That was one of the funnest things, I think, just because I got to swear and ad-lib. But yeah, because most of the time you can't.
That sounds like the perfect job.
It was.
Because they gave you permission to do that.
But I mean, it's kind of a dream job because not everybody gets to do that, right? Not everybody gets to swear or be directed to swear. But that's, I mean, it's so crazy to think of all the different genres of voiceover that are out there that type of instructional thing. There's on hold messages for, you know, banks and telephone, IVR.
IVR, I think they call that. I've directed a bit of IVR.
Yeah.
It's so
Audio
tedious.
books,
Yeah.
which is a whole nother monster.
You've done narration.
Narration. There's all different types of narration too. There's like industrial e-learning type things, which I do a lot of that, where it's just like these corporate videos where it's very instructional and you're explaining things. And so, and there's also a technical side of that. So there could be medical narration, which has all the lingo language that's very heavy and hard to say. Because I actually...
Yeah, give me an example. What would, if someone was, if they said, ooh, medical narration, what does that mean exactly?
It depends on the client, it depends on the product, but I mean, my previous life, I was actually an asbestos personal injury paralegal. So I already have like kind of a medical background in that interesting, weird genre. So for me, medical terminology rolls off my tongue. Same with legal terminology, easy. So for example,
the use of that would be maybe on their website, like Cedars-Sinai could have a website, and they may have a sort of a portal that you need to go to, and your voice would come on guiding people through the portal.
Right. Like if you've been exposed to mesothelioma via asbestosis, please dial 9 or whatever.
I'm so impressed that you could actually say that.
It's a really bad, horrible cancer that you never want to get.
No, I know.
Yeah, you see all the lawyer commercials, like if you've been exposed like that, cable whatever, I don't know. Yeah, there's just all different kinds of
Talk about e-learning, like the e-learning that you've done. Give us an example of that.
Let me think. I've done, I mean, I think it was maybe Big Five Sporting Goods or Whole Foods. It's always kind of like, also like sexual harassment awareness. It's those kinds of things, or just things about very generic.
A lot of human resources sort of materials where like say you're working for a company and you have to sit there through a boring video, but the VO sounds great.
I'm the boring VO that you have to like listen to. I'm sorry, you have to listen to it. But yes, and unfortunately you can't skip. You have to like listen to it. I used to have to listen to those. I'm like, fast forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just very monotone, but trying to stay engaging because, you're talking to a new employee and you want to sound welcoming, like, welcome to the job, welcome aboard, that kind of thing.
Well, don't you think what's interesting about voiceover is, don't you think that we're exposed to voiceover as just a society in general, everywhere, and sometimes we block it out because we're so used to hearing it. Now, for example, you can talk about commercials. You get TV commercials, of course, who hasn't heard or watched a TV commercial?
Right.
Radio, certainly, and now with digital radio, I know when I'm producing radio spots, the buys are now more so digital than they are on terrestrial, meaning the land-based typical radio spots.
Right.
And then, of course, then you can have, as one of my specialties, promo. We are doing promos, obviously, for the networks, but then now there's for streaming services, and then those are run on digital radio, so everything's sort of cross-pollinating. And when I say promo, to give you guys an example, it'd be like, coming up on CBS, that sort of those commercial messages that are tailored towards programming.
Wait, how does that go?
Coming up on CBS. I could do that a million times. I've directed for many years. Anyway, but then there's, of course, then everyone wants to be in animation. Animation
that's
is,
like
as
the
you well
golden
know.
child.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, how many people, when they find out that you're in voiceover, they say, oh my gosh, I just would love to be in animation.
Yes.
And that could be in feature film work. It could be TV series. It could be, again, for the streaming services, or there could be shorts that are just streaming online. YouTube, you can get programming on YouTube.
And e-learning as well. They have e-learning little cartoons for kids, for young kids. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, and of course, then set aside from that, games.
Video games are huge.
Well, the gaming industry, a couple of years ago, I was reading an article about the income, and they said the income in gaming was far surpassing the film industry.
Yep.
And I just saw that Microsoft and Activision, I think, just bought Blizzard the other day.
I saw that too.
So that's an interesting
It's also interesting too, because back in the day, gaming used to be very over-the-top charactery.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, come over here, let's go do this kind of thing. And now it's very more realistic and very cinematic, trying to mimic an actual film.
Right.
So so many times I'll see directions for video games. It's like, we want this real, we want this authentic, we don't want charactery, we don't want super over the top, unless it's like a cartoony, going down the cartoony vein where they want like an evil villain that they want to, whatever, evil laugh or something. But video games, they want them way more realistic, and they're very much more cinematic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's been my experience, just the variety of opportunities that I've been able to provide actors in terms of the types of voice acting projects out there. I mean, every day it's a new job. As a freelancer, I can take on any job that I want to. And, I've been able to work on so many different things. And it's sometimes I things I hadn't even thought of. Many years ago, when Siri first came out, I had the pleasure of directing one of the series. And that was a project that I had no idea what I was getting into, because the technology was so new. And it was very interesting because, the copy was, as you can imagine, quite different from the typical sort of VO copy, in that it was a lot about word sounds. It wasn't as much about strict sort of narrative.
Did you have like things where they had to do 1, 2, 3, and it had to be all in the same? I've done a few auditions that were like that. I think I was on the short list for the Google version of that, I think. But the audition was weird in that it was like very fragmented sentences, bizarre combination of words that we had to say, and I don't know if they ran it through some software or something to have it the way it sounded or something.
No doubt they did.
Yeah.
But we won't go into that.
No.
Anyway, but my point of all that is that it's so exciting, and I think any actor that wants to go into the acting profession, I think voiceover is something that they definitely should consider, and not consider it because they don't feel like they have a unique enough voice.
Right.
Because right now, as you know, a great segue into talking about the styles of acting, especially the commercial world, and you kind of touched on it with the gaming comment you made a few minutes ago about that it's not all about this anymore. It's more cinematic and more real.
Right.
Commercially, it's definitely landed and been that way for a number of years, where they want a more pulled back, reserved read. They don't want it selly.
Right.
And in the promo world, we're facing that now as well, where the reads are not
the voice of God.
Voice of God, coming up on CBS. You're not doing that anymore. Or if you are, it's for specific reasons.
Right.
Nickelodeon may do like a superhero, don't miss Nickelodeon, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's just sounding like, in terms of promo, it's just sounding like you're attached and committed emotionally to the project.
Same thing with movie trailers.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. With movie trailers too, they're steering away to a certain degree from that, the sort of voice of God approach. And one might ask, I'm sure actors would be curious to know why that's happening. And I think a lot of it, because society, in voiceover, like everything, we're affected by pop culture and maybe what's going on politically in the world, of course, and with the entertainment world, other parts of the entertainment world and business. And I think that there's a realism that's coming into play now, that they're asking for, sort of a more organic sort of feel. The newer generations don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to be, forced these entertainment commercial messages anymore. I mean, so many times, I'm sure you've read copy in whatever genre you're reading on, that actors are asked to be very, very real. And that's a very hard skill. Again, one of the things I teach, of the many things I teach when I'm coaching, that it's trying to find ways to turn these words into your own. And
conversational. That's like one of the biggest specification specs that you get on an audition direction, is like, we want this conversational. And I can't tell you how many actors have a really hard time trying to sound conversational, because you are reading a copy. So how do you make, hi, my name is Jessica Blue, sound like conversations? Like, you just have to find that one person that you are thinking you're talking to and just have a conversation with them. Lax it up, relax yourself, and just
But that's hard to do when you're really circling back to what we started with earlier about you're having to self-record. So imagine you're at home. You're if you do have a booth, you're in a relatively confined space, most likely, with a lot of dark material probably around you, kind of shielding you, soundproofing. And you've got this hunk of metal right in front of you, and you're reading from a script. And then you're having to sort of self-direct at the same time. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got to sound like I'm at the bar talking to somebody. Go. That's hard to do, because you're already being set up to fail, because you're reading words that aren't yours. And more often than not, they maybe aren't written in a conversational way. And then you're in an environment that isn't anything close to a natural environment. And then you're also having to have the brain going about, am I reading properly? Am I hitting all the words right? Do I sound okay? Is my equipment working?
It's a lot.
tough.
It's
It's
a
a
lot
lot.
going on.
People don't realize it. And that's why, we get calls all the time about, I want to do voiceover, I want to do this. And they don't realize how difficult it is. And so for actors, I encourage them to get into this. It's wonderful, but just know it's not easy.
It's not a hobby.
It's
a
not
lot
a
of people
hobby.
think it's like, oh, I
No.
can just do a funny voice. Like, it's a lot more than that. There's a lot to it, and yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. Which and that definitely weeds out people that they really want to do it. They're passionate about it. They're excited about it. They want to learn acting, and those are the ones that thrive because they want to dive into the training and figure out the nuances and how to use their voice, how to manipulate their voice, how to approach copy, how to be in the scene, create the scene around them, versus someone who's just looking to make a quick buck. Because if you want to just make a quick buck, this is probably not the career for you.
No, it's a craft. I mean,
It is.
I think that, many, many years ago, when I was thinking about being an actor, I know that's hard to believe.
You really?
I know. Yes.
I
You
remember
amongst
your
many
debut
know.
on stage.
I know.
with me.
We will not talk about that.
Oh.
But anyway, the thing is, there was a moment because I did community theater, and I'm glad I went through that because it allows
Right.
me to be the director that I am today.
Yeah.
That I can certainly understand the problems, the dramas, the torture that actors go through. But I remember thinking about being an actor and if I really had the stomach for it. And I remember someone saying to me, you have to truly embrace the acting profession. It has to be something that you can't imagine your life living without it. You know what I mean? There's got to be a hunger for it. It's not, like you said, it's not a hobby. It's not just a little sideline I want to dabble in to make a little extra money. It is something that you've got a desire inside of you. And I'm not saying you have to just specifically have that desire for just promo, although that's wonderful. And we know a lot of people that are just promo. But to be just in general for acting, you've got to have a love for acting. You've got to have a hunger for acting. And I think that's what separates, I've worked with so many actors over the years. There's some that are fantastic. There's some that are phenomenal. There's some that are mediocre, but they're good at their, few things. But there's that group that far surpass that. They're I would call them the Academy Award-winning voiceover actors, let's say. And those people are the people that even when they don't have a job that day, they can't imagine not being in front of their microphone doing something. And they're not doing it just for the money. They're doing it for the love of the profession. Yeah. And I think that's so important to have that love for it because we can hear that every day in the auditions that we do.
Absolutely.
Right now I'm training a really wonderful, wonderful performer, but he has been in the business for a long time, and I'm sensing that there is a bit of resentment towards the changes. And I finally had to sit him down one day a couple of weeks ago, and I said, listen, you're amazingly talented. You've had a wonderful voiceover career. The voiceover field has changed. The sort of the state of things, which we've talked about in terms of the real sound these days and the opportunities out there and the union versus non-union and all that. But I said, if you resent it, we're going to hear it and you're not going to book. So you need to figure out a way around that. Celebrate the history that you've had, the success that you've had. Try to enjoy this next phase. If you can adapt to those changes, absolutely do it. But if the new sound is completely out of your range, try to find other ways to engage in terms of your voiceover career. Maybe find something different. You haven't done audiobooks before. Do audiobooks now.
Yeah.
Something like that. But if we walk in with that chip on your shoulder, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear it, and you're not going to book.
Definitely. So we've talked a lot about from the actor's perspective and what actors need to do to jump into voiceover, but we are both directors as well. So from the director's standpoint, when you are, let's say when you're casting something and you have sent out the auditions and you're coming back, you're listening to the auditions, what is it that you're listening for casting if you're going to then direct those people?
Good question. And as you were asking me that, I was thinking that perhaps that answer would change depending on the genre. But I think just in general, I think that, from a directorial standpoint, you can speak to this too, because in many ways we're acting as the casting director and director of our projects. And so when I'm reading a script, before I cast it, before I write down the names of the people that I feel like I want to hear, and then of course I'll allow agents, of course, to submit their own people as well. their own ideas. But I already have an idea in my mind of what I want that role to sound like in terms of not only pitch and delivery, but the performance itself in terms of the attitude and the, and the character. And so when I'm evaluating the auditions, I'm listening primarily for those things. Actually, I'm listening to see pitch wise if it works. In dubbing, of course,
Right.
it's and you will agree, it's got to sound, the voice has to sound like it's coming out of that mouth,
Right.
and that pretty much will override almost everything else. I mean, you want them to be good actors, but if they don't sound, that voice doesn't sound like it's coming out of that mouth,
It's not
we're
gonna
probably
work.
not going to
Yeah.
hire them. But for a commercial, I'd say that I'm listening for, there's usually a pitch of voice and a style of voice, whether it's texture, no texture, whether it's high, low, mid-range, young, old. There are all these things that are going on in my head. So when I'm reviewing casting, I start tossing out the ones that didn't really hit. And it's not a narrow range. I don't want to make it sound like it's got to be exactly this, because I want to be creative as well and allow for a flow of creativity to adjust my expectations. But I think I'm listening for that, and then performance as well, to make sure that attitudinally, tonally, they hit the mark. And then I will keep narrowing it down, and then I'll walk away and rest my ears, and then come back in with fresh ears and review that smaller group. And sometimes I will go, if I have time, I'll go back to the eliminated group one more time very quickly to make sure that I haven't tossed out someone that might bring something interesting to it that I hadn't thought of in terms of the type of read. Would you say the same thing?
Absolutely. And I was going to say too, for also for dubbing and for video games as well, hearing if they are creating the scene. So when I'm listening to it, am I there? Am I in the scene with them? So if it's a first person shooter game and it's a military type situation, and the line is, come on, let's go over here, let's fire the bomb or something. If they do some kind of ad lib or something, or lead in that makes me feel like I'm in a ditch with them or I'm in that scene, that's gonna, oh yeah, I like that, what they just did there, that's good. So if they're creating the scene for me, that I tune into that. If they're just sort of reading it off the page kind of, and they're not necessarily connected to the scene, the copy or whatever, then that's like, not gonna pass.
Well, exactly. And that's such a great point, because, in the more theatrical realm, let's say dubbing and animation and games, we'll put in that group. Oftentimes when we send out sides to the actors,
and they don't have the context.
They don't have the context. And that's really important, by the way. And sometimes, and I've had to argue, I've had to fight to get context to the actors. It's only fair to them. They need context to be able to give us a performance.
Right.
But what we also do is we send them various chunks of different scenes. And it's so important for actors to pay attention to the pivots, the emotional pivots. And if they miss that, then I figure, why do I want that person in the booth if they're not going to get it?
Right.
And by emotional pivots, it's about, in one scene, you're frustrated. The next scene, you're talking to your father and you're being emotional. The next scene, the pivot might be you're really sad. The next scene might be you're very happy. And we'll group those together, and we want to hear how quickly you can pivot from one to the other, because that tells us as directors, whether you're doing animation, dubbing, or games, how quickly we can zip through the scenes, how we can get it. Because in normal conversations, we oftentimes pivot our emotions. Like we might be laughing, and you might say something that'll piss me off. Not that would ever happen. But I might turn around and go, hey, that was very funny. What did you mean by that? What the fuck? What did you mean by that? So it's emotional pivot.
Right.
But I can't tell you how many times I received auditions and they completely missed the pivot.
They missed the mark completely. And I think that is a shame that we are not able to give them more information, to give them that extra oomph to make them do the best audition that they can, because it's really a disservice to them, because they're not able to give us the best audition because they don't have technically all the information. So it's unfortunately, they just got to do the best that they can. But yeah, finding those transitions is super key.
So from a directorial standpoint, let's say, for example, an actor walks in, and let's say it's someone that you really don't know, but they landed the audition, or that you were told to hire them for some reason, which does happen. And let's say they walk in and they're not giving you what you want.
Been there, done that.
How do you treat that? Like,
Um,
what, from a directorial standpoint, what is it that you can say that may help an actor,
well, depending
listening to
on
this?
what it is they're doing, I'll try and say the same thing many different ways, and I'll try to figure. And that's also part of being a director is you have to learn how to communicate with the actor because every actor is a little different. Some people
Right.
respond differently to different things, so you have to be like really fast, figure out how do I communicate with this person. Do I have to like handhold them? Do they get it? Do they understand the lingo? Do I have to spell it out for them? So that's number one. I will sometimes, if they are just not getting my direction, and sometimes I will pause and I'll say to the engineer, I'm like, am I making myself clear? Do you know what I'm talking about? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, it's not just me. Great.
And make sure the talkback is working.
Talkback is muted.
Muted.
Don't want them to hear that.
Right.
But if that's the case, if they're still not, if I've tried every which way to try and pull it out of them and direct them and shake it up, and sometimes I will tell them, it's like, dude, just step away from the mic for a second, shake it out, just take a breath. You know, you're getting in your head or whatever. It's okay. Like my goal is to make them as comfortable as possible so they don't get stuck in their head, because when they do, that's a recipe for disaster and they start to spiral down. We don't want them to go there. I don't want them to go there. So if all that stuff is not working, I will just play the original production. And I say, I want you to just listen to the character. Don't try to follow along with it. Just watch and listen to their intention, their tone, their inflection, all of that, and basically just copy it.
Yeah.
Just try to copy it the best you can, mimic it. And if all else fails, that's what I end up doing. And 90% of the time that will work. But I don't want to go there because I trust my actors enough to give them the leeway to figure it out, to give their own sense of self and their twist on the character and let them prove it.
Yeah, fortunately in the dubbing world, by the time they've gotten to you or to me when we're directing, they're vetted.
Most of
pretty
the time.
much. Most
There's
of the time.
still some
yeah.
new people that I've never worked with before, but
Exactly.
it's fine.
And so I think that, and again, that's probably, of all the types of voiceover, that's probably one of the easier ones because you're basically copying a performance.
Pretty much,
So,
yeah.
Once you get, let's say, for example, the block that they may have is that, and I found this to be true, was they weren't used to voice cue.
Right.
Voice cue being the
rhythm
cueing.
of band.
The rhythm
It's
of band is
basically
the
like
cueing.
karaoke. You
Yeah.
just see this line
And that's how we
scrolling
dub.
across the screen.
Yeah.
And you have to start when it hits a certain spot, and then you start talking, and then you have to stop by the time the line ends.
And as we know, it can be pretty tough because
a
I've had
learning
actors
curve.
show up without their glasses, which I love.
I've been there. I've done
I
that.
know, right? But the thing is, the idea of what I found in directing, let's say commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an actor may have booked the audition and they did a great job, and we always have the audition on hand to play as a reference
Right.
because sometimes it's not
Yes.
the next day. It could
Right.
be 2 weeks and they've auditioned a bunch of other
Months.
things.
Like, what
And
am
we
I
all,
in here
yes,
for?
exactly. Things can happen in between that time. The copy can change. The ad agency may have made a shift in the creative team, and all of a sudden there's a different creative, and they were just given this project, and they for some reason resented that, and they didn't like this project, and so they may project that into the session and make it kind of a weird session. Sometimes the actors are having a bad day. They walk in and they've come from terrible traffic. I know, hard to believe in LA. Or they've just had a life moment. They just heard their spouse is going to divorce them, or their kid is sick. Or
I had someone get into a car accident on the way to the session,
Yeah.
and they were like 10 minutes late. I'm like sitting here going, come on, where are you? Like, I'm sorry, I was in a car accident. I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? Like,
Exactly.
From my perspective, but it's like,
But
yeah.
from a directorial standpoint, I think it's my job, and you said this, is that we want to disarm as much defensiveness as if at all possible.
Yeah.
Because, the true sharing of emotion is what we're trying to get. And if you create blocks in a session, then you're just setting everyone up to fail.
Yeah.
And I have so many situations have happened with actors over the many years. Most of them are not their fault in terms of what's happened, in terms of why the session's not working out, why they're not getting the performance or whatever. But I sometimes have had to go in. I'll turn the mics off. If I have ad agency folks there, I'll say, hey, why don't we all take a break, guys? And you guys go to the restroom, go get your beer, go get me one while you're at it. And I'll go in the booth.
Right.
And I will talk to the actor and I'll say, first of all, thank you for being here today. And you obviously gave us some great stuff in the audition that we're trying to recapture from you. But right now, we're not getting exactly what we need. But let's figure out a way to get this. And I'll try to open up a dialogue that's positive with the actor and try to get to the root of the problem and then try to work around it. And I think you also said something a little while ago, too, about how we might direct different actors differently. And actors have a sort of inner vocabulary and directorial vocabulary dialogue.
Yep.
Or they may have triggers that we want to avoid too, that I've learned from certain talent over the years. So as a director, we have to also be so emotionally attuned to the room, to the performer, to the ad agency, to the dubbing house, to everyone around us. There's a lot of pressure on directors as well, because our goal is just to create a performance or create an environment that is suitable for giving the perfect performance.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do. And so it can be very, very tough. And again, I could regale you with tons of stories. I'm sure we've already talked about many stories just over the many years we've known each other, of our war stories of situations that have gone poorly. You know, there's one funny one that I have, and it was during a promo session. A very, very well-known promo actor came in, and he had an account with us and for a certain network. And I knew his work quite well. And if I said his name, you would immediately spark to it and know. And his sound is very specific out there. He's still around, by the way. It's not someone who's passed. And anyway, but one day he walked in and we were chatting, and I put him in the booth, gave him the copy, and told my engineer, okay, let's get ready. We had timings on the spot. And he started talking, and I sensed a different sort of rhythm in his voice, his delivery, and sound in his voice. And I got on the topic. I said, hey, let's just go ahead and warm up again. Let's do one more warm up. And here's the time we're going for. We need this spot to come in 15 seconds and go. He tried it again, and he sounded terrible. And my engineer said, what is going on with this guy? I mean, he usually hits it 100%. Not normal at all. So finally, after a couple of those, and I could see he was getting frustrated. So finally I said to the engineer, turn the mic off. I want to go in and talk to him. So I walked in. I said, hey, bud, so how's it going? What's happening today? And he said, oh, it's okay. I'm sorry. I'm kind of, not getting my words out, am I? And I said, yeah, it's kind of unusual. He said, yeah, I was just thinking about my morning, and I was having some back problems, and I took a muscle relaxer this morning. Maybe that had something to do with it. And I said, you did what?
Oh my God.
This is all muscle up here.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I guess that wasn't right, what I should have been doing. I said, okay, we're going to take a break. You're going to go drink some coffee.
Oh my God.
And maybe some Red Bull.
Do some jumping jacks.
And yeah, do something. And so I had to let him go. I called his agent and I said,
oh no.
Not cool.
Oh no.
And he apologized. He came back later for free and did it, as he should, because we were burning studio hours. But bottom line is, we all as directors have faced all these sort of sometimes, hopefully, humorous situations.
Hopefully.
But they can be pretty crazy.
So you were talking earlier when I asked you about casting and how you pick people, and you mentioned that you will sometimes also reach out to agents and have agents submit people. From your perspective, what is the best way for an actor to jump on board to ultimately become in your inner circle of go-to actors if they don't necessarily have an agent yet?
Also, you want the magic key.
I do. What is the magic key?
I don't know if I want to open up and tell you
Yes,
that.
you do.
Okay, well, so as you know, the process of when an actor wants to do voiceover, they need to train.
Yes.
Whether it's if they're starting from square one, they may want to go and do an on-camera class just to get some basic acting skills. But if they already have some acting skills already, then they go specifically right to an acting school for voiceover. And whether it's private or groups, there's tons of all that out there. And then ultimately, what these folks will hear, these actors will hear, is that there'll be murmurings of, you need to get a demo reel together. And the demo reel, it's definitely important because it's your calling card. Think about it. And on camera, you've got a headshot. The casting people need to know what you look like. In voiceover, people need to know what you sound like. So you want to, hopefully in your training, you want to go to a school where they may be able to refer you to a known demo producer. You may want to do your own research. And I say do your research, and to any actor that would ask us about that, I would suggest vet the producer as well. Yep. There's some that are better than others, but there's some wonderful people. Some of them are my dearest friends. I've done demos for people when I have the time.
You did my promo.
That's right, I did. That's right, and it was fantastic, by the way.
So fantastic.
And once the actors have the demo, and I'll preface that by saying they should be ready to do the demo.
Yes,
Because so many
100%.
actors are rushing to get the
Yes.
demo done because they think that is the magic key, and it is not. It's part of it.
Because can I just interject one thing?
Sure.
You must be able, once you have a demo, sometimes you will get cast off of that demo straight without an audition. You have to be able to reproduce anything on that demo like that.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Exactly. Because, that would irritate me if I, and you, of course, from a directorial standpoint, that if you hire someone off their demo
You're
and
thinking,
they
"Oh,
walk
they
in
could
and
do
they don't
this."
sound like that,
It's like,
then
what?
the award goes to the demo producer and not the actor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, so let's say you get the demo done, it sounds amazing, and then what you would want to do is then send files to the agents around the country. And I say around the country because it used to be many years ago, you either wanted to be in New York or LA or Chicago, the
Right.
three big major markets, because they had the biggest advertising markets.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can be anywhere.
Anywhere.
And there are some big talent agencies not in those three markets. And so the bottom line is the actors should market themselves to get representation or a manager on board as soon as possible, because those are the people that are going to be providing opportunities to them and providing the opportunities that I'm providing to the talent agents to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't know you, then I won't know how to send you a script because you're not with an agency or with a manager.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of pay-to-play sites now online, and certainly I've referred a lot of voiceover folks out there that are extraordinarily good, but it's really tough and competitive out there to get an agent because,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, all the agents have a lot of great people in almost, if not every category. So you can start your career off by going through a pay-to-play site, and I mean that by there are these sites out there that do casting that you have to pay to get access to casting, but they're legitimate. Sometimes the rates are a little off, and you have to be very careful about that, but you can still get access to work. And if you book a couple of jobs like that, that will get you exposure and potentially exposure to an agent who would be willing to sign you.
Mm-hmm.
And then by that, you get access to people like me, like you, people who are casting, because your voice is out there and you now have an agent and or a manager. And that's the way you get in to the VO business in terms of being in the mainstream, getting access to a multitude of types of jobs and the big jobs. We call them the national agencies, meaning the talent agencies in LA and New York.
Right.
And I guess you could also say there are one or two in Chicago whom I love, and they're fantastic as well. There are a lot of small regional, we call them regional talent agencies around the country, and sometimes they're a little bit more open for taking on talent. And so I always refer new talent to the regional agencies because oftentimes they get access to the national agency copy.
Right. Yeah.
So there are ways to do it, but I think that is the way to get access to voiceover, is to go through those proper channels of training, demo reel, marketing yourself. Networking is a big deal in voiceover. There are also voiceover conferences you can go to now that have popped up, and I speak at them, and you can go up and introduce yourselves, hand them a clip drive of your reel if you want to, or send them a link to your site and get exposure that way too. But that's the process. That's how you get in, and then you hopefully will get exposure to all kinds of great copy through your talent agent.
How do you feel about people promoting themselves on social media? Like someone on LinkedIn saying, hey, I do this kind of voiceover or this kind of voiceover. Maybe they have an agent, maybe they don't. Maybe they're almost trying to shop for an agent. But that's a way for them to be seen, be heard, regardless of however many eyes and ears see it, hear it.
Well, listen, I think that if you're out there marketing yourself in any way, shape, or form, that's good. Whether or not that's going to result in a flurry of voiceover activity, I don't think so, because there's just so much of that already going on out there.
Yeah.
There are some folks out there that have created really interesting business models of being marketing experts for voiceover. I think that they've done a good job from what I know. But I do think that everyone's trying to find that special golden door to walk through that will magically deliver VO campaigns into their inbox so they'll have access to them. I don't think that exists anymore, that magic sort of door, golden door. I think it takes an all-out effort. Even if you get an agent, that your networking never stops. By the
No,
way,
you still
need
have
to be
work
smart.
to do. Yeah.
Exactly, you need to be smart about it. And look, you networked your way down to LA. And look, you have a fantastic career. So,
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important to remember that the job never stops in terms of marketing yourself, training yourself, always keeping in touch with the current events, social media,
Trends,
the trends,
everything.
all that.
Yeah.
Because being a voiceover talent is marketing to a certain. You're in the marketing industry. You're an extension of these
Selling yourself.
exactly of these companies. And so I just think that as an actor, I suggest that you stay current, stay aware, study, enjoy the business as best as you possibly can. Don't allow yourself to get frustrated, and just know that it's going to be a wild ride that could potentially
Such a
be
wild ride.
amazingly financially productive and fruitful, and also emotionally if you can get a
Fulfilling.
kick out of it.
Yep.
So,
Amen.
you think we've covered it?
I do. I think we did. Rocked it. Yeah, so for anybody who's watching and listening, if you don't watch this, you could suffer severe illness, seizures, diarrhea, and possibly death. So make sure you watch this.